Everybody, welcome to this episode of Think Business. Looking forward to talking with Nigel O'Neill. Nigel, it's great to connect with you. I know we talked briefly before we went on. Thanks for chiming in from London. I've been there, and it's a great place to be. Founder and CEO of Tarralugo.com. You are bringing digital technology into companies and strategizing with them on how to make that the most effective to grow their business. I love talking about digital technology. I am a business coach. I work with solopreneurs to Fortune companies and everything in between, all different positions within the company. But when I graduated college, when I was 23, I'm 52 now, I started an internet company with my brother and a buddy. And so I love the digital space, and I always think it's great to kind of look and see kind of how digital technology, what works for a company. And it's interesting, there's so much technology today that I think sometimes it's really hard for companies to figure out exactly what technology works for them. And let's start there. So how does a company, kind of strip everything away to begin the conversation to say what technology makes sense for us?
Well, thank you. That's a great question. And, going straight into the meat of it, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
I think the real thing is when it comes to technology, as you rightly pointed out, there is so much out there. There's so much technology, and everyone gets caught up saying, oh, technology's doing this, technology's going in that direction, I must do that. AI is a classic example of that right now. If you listen to organizations, if you listen to the Fortune 500, I think there's something like 40% of the CEOs mentioned AI in their latest earnings calls.
Yeah.
The trouble is, when you go from a sort of technology standpoint and think about it that way, maybe it's the wrong way to look at it. What you should be doing is looking at, what am I trying to achieve as a business?
Yeah.
What are my business goals? What are my business objectives? Then you work back from there. And that's really where we come in. That's our starting point. We say, okay, you're a business. What are you trying to achieve? Okay, how can we then work the technology, all the people, all the processes and everything behind it to actually align to your business goals and help you achieve your business goals?
Yeah. I think there's actually another question that I find, Nigel, which is, what do you want to achieve? What are you trying to do? And what are you not trying to do? I think that is also a very important question, because I think sometimes the people get confused, and so they move lanes, or they're kind of a little bit in one lane, so their messaging becomes clear. And so how, from your perspective, I know how I see it a lot of times, how do people get hyper focused on what they are trying to do? And I'm going to throw in one more layer to this question.
Okay.
With them competing just with themselves and no one else.
Okay. So, and from a technology strategy perspective, you talk?
Yes.
Okay. So when we're talking technology strategy, ultimately it's about starting, what is your business goal? What is your business strategy? So are you, for example, some of the areas we've been brought in, and maybe that will help clarify, maybe answer that question for you.
Sure.
So in the past, we've been brought into organizations where they've turned around and said, we've got a risk at the moment that, let's say we're a project-based organization. And a lot of our revenues come and go with economic cycles. It's up and down like this. And they say, we want to grow annuity revenues. So what we want to do is just start to smooth out our revenue line. So we're getting money coming in constantly, and therefore we're not at the whim of the project cycle and the economic cycles and so forth. And so where we come in and say, okay, that's brilliant. So that's what your business goal is. That's what your business strategy is, to de-risk, is to grow your business in a certain direction. We'll then help those organizations, and where we come in to say, okay, so that's what you want to do. What technologies are out there which support your business goal, whatever that may be? Maybe you're in the creative industries or you're in real estate, whichever the sector may be. Then we work with them to say, okay, so what does your organization from a technology and a digital standpoint need to look like to help you achieve that? And so, for example, going back to that example I was talking about just now, we went into this organization because they're project-based.
Yeah.
What they'd do is do a project, and they'd onboard staff in an interim or short-term period. build up some knowledge, build up the technology foundations, deliver that project, they do brilliantly. And for the duration of that project and for however long that piece of work needs to last, they would then have the staff there doing everything. But once that project was over, they'd offboard all the staff, go back to their core, shrink back down to their core team. But all of that knowledge went out of the door. So every time a new project came along, they started building up again, and following that cycle. So when we came in, we said, if you want to do annuity revenues, you're going to have to organize yourself differently. It's not just about your technology, but the way in which you build your technology, your people, your processes, and so them understand what that future state needed to look like, and then help them implement it, basically.
It's so interesting. I think we do similar things, but I think you're bringing in the digital technology to then implement and support. And I would, if I, as a business coach, when I get to that piece, I would refer you to kind of determine the technology. But what is the same, and when I'm talking to clients about stuff like this, and it doesn't matter if it is a solopreneur or a fortune company, I think that people are not thinking about this from a quantitative standpoint. Two things I want to dive into with you. One, assuming we're talking full-time workers, somebody really only works 2,000. Each person works approximately 2,000 to 2,400 hours a year. So you have that much bandwidth for that specific person. Secondly, you have, and you're talking, and a lot of companies talk about goals and what they want to accomplish. But to me, that's never the goal. The goal is, and you've mentioned this, the goal is the process. The process is the goal, building the process. So, and because I hear and see it all the times in companies I'm coaching, they do this, and then they forget about it. They have to start over, right? Long story short.
Yes.
And so let's kind of talk about the technology that are at people's fingertips if they can't afford you or they can't afford me, or maybe they see it as an expense versus an investment, right? Which we know we are.
Yeah.
But let's talk about things at their fingertips. For example, in your case, and I see this case in companies that I coach all the time, create Zoom training modules, right? So if I'm training you on something and when we're within the same company and I'm doing this on Zoom, I'm recording it and then I'm creating a training catalog that people can go to. I can then put this in ChatGPT or Claude.ai, extract a checklist, and I'm doing this in real time. Yeah. And so again, not to take away from anything I do or you do, but I want to break it down to the simple to show that people can do it on their own. I don't think most people will, because those 2,000 to 2,400 hours are typically allocated. So they need people like you and I to actually come in, help facilitate and create the space. But talk a little bit about, how people can just think about doing things that are right in front of them.
I think when it comes to individuals in a workplace, because most of the clients we deal with are medium to large enterprises.
Yeah.
From a digital strategy perspective, and that's talking sort of big stuff about where do they want to be. At an individual level, I think the key thing that people can do, and it's really about empowering themselves and productivity, isn't it? Yeah, as you rightly say, there's a finite amount of time. So if we break it down to individual levels, you gave some great examples about how you can use AI to go out and take a document, summarize it for you, use it to improve your productivity, use it to be able to educate other people. I think the key things for individuals is go out and use the technology, play with it, learn about it, invest a bit of that time you have, because quite often what I see is people go, and you must see this even more than I do. Yeah. They tell me, I've only an amount of time each year and I can't do anything and I haven't got the bandwidth to look at that.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is, actually, if you took just a few hours, looked at it, did something with the technology, like use AI, use it as a co-pilot, support what you're doing, you may actually find that you generate yourself more bandwidth to go out and do other things. So part of it is educating yourself. Go out there, play with the technology, educate yourself, use it. And then also more at a corporate level as well, quite often people forget that within the corporate world, you subscribe to, I don't know whether you use Google or whether you use Microsoft 365,
Sure.
but there's some great tools in there which you can already leverage and you've already got at your fingertips. So go out and use those.
Yeah. You know what I find? I do my best to push as much content as I possibly can.
Yeah.
And tell people what to do, because our clients are the ones that want to know how to do it specifically for them.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that people have a really hard time with, which is why they utilize people like myself and you, Nigel, is because they won't create the space that they need to for themselves to take themselves to the next level on their own.
Yeah.
So they need people like you and I to come in and create a predictable flow of forcing them to do what they know they need to do. There's a great book, one of my favorite books of all time, is by Stephen Pressfield. I've read all of his business books. They're all great. You would love them.
Okay.
It's called The War of Art. Have you read The War of Art?
No, I've done The Art of War.
Well, this is not The Art of War. This is The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. And what it talks about is, his book is brilliant. It defines resistance and he talks about that as human beings, we resist what we need to do most.
Yeah.
And so what we need to do most, Think Community, is figure out how to grow our business and adapt technology and adapt digital solutions. But I also want to talk about old school, because to me, old school is the new school, meaning low tech works, digital works, strategy works. Everything that you're talking about to save someone probably tens, if not hundreds of thousands of hours of time works. But what I see is what also works in a multiplying way is picking up the phone and calling someone and going to a networking event and actually calling someone back, which is something I hear all the time. People say, oh, thank you for coming back. Going to a face-to-face meeting, going to a conference to meet people face-to-face, shaking hands and connecting. And so as much as what I think you do is so important, I want to rewind it to the fundamentals of business, meaning strategy starts with everything I just, in my opinion, I'd love your opinion, what I just shared. Any thoughts?
So I think one of the things I often talk to clients about, and when we're sitting down with the board, when we're sitting down with the CTO, the CIO, etc., is about getting the basics right.
Right.
And one of the things, if on our website, it says the fundamentals of business haven't changed.
Yeah.
And people get so caught up going, my business is going to be consumed. It's going to be disintermediated and everything else like that. Technology can accelerate and hyper evolve business models.
Right.
Ultimately, the fundamentals of business haven't changed. It's one of those things, you still need to make a product or service which someone wants to buy.
Right.
And you need to make it at a price point that someone is prepared to pay, you can make a profit on. That's still business. Those fundamentals still exist today.
Correct. And I just want to say, and if you're going to spend millions of dollars on a technology to get people to call you, you better fundamentally have taught people how to answer the phone and be kind to people.
Yeah.
And ask people questions.
Exactly. And technology, for all of the wonderful things about technology, business all comes back to people.
It all comes back, right?
It's 100% comes back to people, because technology, it doesn't matter what you do with technology, but if the people aren't behind it, if it doesn't support the people, if it's not delivering the outcome that people want, it's no good, because people are what really makes the difference in the business. Yes. Technology is just a tool.
Yes. Amen to that. Okay. So now I want to take it here. Okay. You ready? So now companies, people say, oh, we need this, we need this, we need this. And the companies in the leadership boardroom say, our people are telling us they need this and this and this. So companies invest $100,000, $1 million, $10 million.
Yeah.
And then nobody uses the technology. Whether they don't roll it out, they're used to their same ways. They're not tapping into the technology. I get brought in to companies. I do one-on-one coaching. I do keynotes and speaking and trainings and things of that nature. but I sometimes get brought into companies to talk at their annual events or quarterly events to encourage and empower people to use the technology that the company has brought in to make them more money, get them faster this, faster that. And 80-90% of the people just don't use it. So how do we get people to actually use the technology?
You've got to. I've been through. It's got.
Do you see what I'm seeing and hearing?
It's one of those things I've been involved in so many times. Yeah. And it's one of those ones where how do you get people to adopt technology? Because this is what you're talking about is technology adoption.
Right.
And what you're talking about there is change management.
Right.
And change management is helping people understand why they should adopt a new technology. But before you even get down to that point of the technology, before you even invest, because what will happen is a salesperson will come along and go, you need to buy this technology. It's going to be brilliant. It's going to revolutionize your business. It's going to increase your productivity fourfold. But actually, what you need to do is talk to your people.
Yeah.
Talk to your staff. Talk to the people at the front end who are supposed to be using this technology. Understand how they work. Understand their work patterns. Understand what the flow of information is. Understand how you make their work processes more productive and better. Then go and work out what the technology needs to be. Don't come and you see it so often in the cases you're referring to. People come in and try and impose a technology. And what happens is you'll get passive resistance.
Yeah.
People will turn around and go, oh yeah, the people up high are telling us to go and use this technology. Yeah. This is not relevant. This has become the ministry of workload. Right. We don't want to work like this. This is not, we're doing data entry here. It's simple things like, look at the way in which people work, and the technology should be seamless and integrated into their way of work. And it should be able to accelerate how they perform their tasks.
Yeah.
So don't make it the ministry of workload. Don't make it so that you're doing multiple, you go to what I've seen it before. You go to one system, you log in, and then they have to go to another system, log in there, transfer the data from that system to that system. Yeah. All of a sudden, it's just become an additional headache for them. So instead of,
So go ahead, finish. I'm sorry. I just wanted to add one thing to that.
So all I was going to say is in those situations, what's failed to happen is people haven't understood what the people who are supposed to be using the technology, how they're working. And that's really about communication, and that's really about understanding your business and not trying to impose from high, but making sure you bring everybody into the process before you even start building a technology or buying a technology or whatever the process, whatever you're deciding to do. Make sure you bring your people inside the tent and have them explain to you how their lives could be made better.
I'll layer one more thing on that because a crowd favorite of one of my keynotes is time management. I do a time management training, and my dad, I'm 52, and my dad, when I was 18, signed me up for a time management course with Franklin Planner. I did a one-day course because he made me do it, which I'm so grateful for because I really got to start to master my time, and now I teach time management. And one of the things that I think it comes down to is because you can tell people and they can see people being more productive, being less stressed, making more money. I mean, they can see it right in front of them, yet they don't know what that first step in bridge is. And one of the things I see in just talking time management is, earlier we talked about you got about 2,000 to 2,400 hours a year, right? Depending on the person and what they're working. When I do time management, sometimes I say, I always say, how many people feel like they don't have 5 minutes? And everybody raises their hand. I said, so if you can leave here today and I give you 5 minutes back, will that be a successful day? Everyone says yes. I said, how many people here don't believe me by show of hands that I can give you 5 minutes back? And half the room raises their hand. My point of saying this is I think some of the training that needs to be done when new technology gets put into place is addition by subtraction.
Yeah.
And so they have to retrain people how to save 5 minutes here and 5 minutes here. For every 4 minutes saved, it's 24 hours a year. And so if I look at technology, I want companies, when I'm talking to companies, to look at it and say, you're implementing technology that you need people to use 10 minutes a day. So we got to figure out how to subtract 20 minutes a day to average out to 10 minutes a day. So they then have the time to you the time and the space to actually use what you're investing in. And that's where I think companies get it wrong, Nigel. They just keep on piling. They teach people how to use it, but they don't teach people how to be more efficient in everything else underneath. Any thoughts?
It's again back to what I said earlier. It's about the people,
right?
Technology is about people, and and that's what you're referring to there. It's about the change management.
Yeah,
and change management change management doesn't start once you've decided to do a project.
Yeah,
and you decided to roll it out and implement it, and before someone walks into the office and finds that they've got a new piece of technology on their desktop.
Yeah,
change management doesn't start there. It starts way beforehand, and this is about communication with people. It's about taking any good digital and technology strategy at its heart. It should have people, and the next thing it should be about is communication.
Yeah,
you should be able to articulate it, and as part of that as well, because I've had the privilege of both working as a consultant and selling into large corporations. I've also had the privilege of sitting in the C-suite and having that chief digital and technology officer role for large corporates, and actually being on the other side of it. And as part of that, any vision and any technology strategy and any digital strategy, it needs to have a vision which people can buy into. And it's not about the technology, it's about what it's going to help the business and the people achieve and what you're going to do. And if you can start to articulate that, then you can start people on that journey, and they can start to see why they should be using a technology, and more importantly, how it's going to improve their productivity, their time management, and what the benefits are to them. And then you'll start to see that adoption come naturally.
Yeah. I love it. People, communication, vision, the got to keep the vision in front of people every single day. I think you articulated it perfectly, talking about the people. If you go to your website, Tarralugo.com, on it says digital hasn't changed the fundamentals of business. It's changed the way we do business. Our expertise can help you navigate these challenges. That being said, let's move into a speed round. A book that's had a big impact on you.
It was a biography of a gentleman called Charles Forte. And let me contextualize this, because you probably haven't heard of Charles Forte.
I haven't, but I always love a new book.
He was a businessman who was born about 100 years ago. He is British Italian, and in the 1930s, he came from fairly humble beginnings, and he grew a multi-billion-pound business empire. And in the 1930s, he was about to start his first business, which was a milk bar on Regent Street in central London. And one of the things I loved about this book, I read it when I was probably about 13, 14 years old.
What's the name of the book?
It's a biography on Charles Forte.
Okay.
And what he did was, before he signed the lease on his first business property, he was opening up a coffee shop, or milk bar as it was called then. He stood outside for several days and he counted how many people walked past. And for me, I love that simplicity, doing the basics right.
Nice. Yes.
It wasn't about trying to create complex business models. Right. If I'm going to sell coffee, how many people walk past? Right. I remember that book really, it was just that moment really stuck in my head. So that was one of the books which has influenced me massively.
That sounds great. I'm gonna put that on my wish list. It almost makes you think location is wrong, and it's really footsteps.
Well, if you're selling coffee, exactly. So but he did the basics. He got in and just did the basics well, and that was a cornerstone, or one of the foundations of his success.
I love it. Somebody just told me about a book, and that I want to tell you about it, and I can't remember the name. I had never heard of it, and it's about a guy who, similar story, like it's called The Fish That Ate the Whale. Are you familiar with it? It's about this guy. I'm getting it on Audible. It comes out in a week and a half. It's about this guy who just built the whole banana business. It's supposed to be a fascinating story. I'm excited to dive in and read that, because I'd never heard of the book. All right. Best piece of wisdom you've ever received.
I'm going to be cheeky here. I'm going to give you two. First one was, if you don't fall over, you're not trying hard enough.
Yeah.
And that was my best friend gave it to me in relation to skiing.
I like it.
But I thought it was a brilliant, best life advice I've ever had.
Yeah.
And the second piece of advice was actually business advice. One of my early bosses, this is in the days when we used to send letters and email was still in its infancy.
Yeah.
And he turned around and said, write your document, be it a letter, email, proposal, and then go through and take out every single word you don't need in there.
Yeah.
And it's really about getting that conciseness of message.
So there's a great book. My favorite book of the entire year is called Smart Brevity. I don't know if you've read that book. It's by the guys. You got to get it. It's from the guys who started Axios and Politico. The book is absolutely brilliant. It's brilliant. And when I refer it to people or give it to people, they end up buying 5, 10, 15, 20 copies for their entire department or company or group that they run. It's a brilliant book. It's a brilliant book. And letters are like we talked about earlier, old school, handwritten letters. They're great. Okay, last question, Nigel. Finish the sentence. One thing everybody can do to connect more deeply with their people is
get out there and talk to them.
Amen.
It's not one of my favorite things when I'm in the office. I just go and talk to people, do a bit of a flyby, go and have a conversation, have a chat. And it's amazing. Just go and sit down and have lunch with people. And it doesn't have to be a formal lunch, but just go out, communicate, talk. Yeah. It's amazing what those conversations can lead to.
Yeah. Nigel, this was great. I appreciate your insight. I enjoyed the conversation. And I loved all the fundamentals of not only strategy, but reverse engineering strategy to just old school basic business. Think Community, we talk a lot about this on the podcast. I talk a lot about this with my clients. One of the most important things that we can do is never forget about our people. I get calls sometimes where I'm talking to C-level execs that I'm working with, or doesn't really matter, but no matter what size the company is, I'll hear, I feel a little disconnected, or I'm not really sure what the next move is. And my solution is very easy. Talk to 5 people, talk to 3 people in your company every single day. Pick up the phone, call them, go see them, Zoom them, Teams them. If you don't, because the higher you get up in a business, this is just the reality. The busier you get, the higher you get up in a company, the more detached you actually get from the people and the product and the service that you do. Yeah. Because as you're managing people specifically, I saw this as a manager, and I coach a lot of managers and owners. And the further you get away from it, you almost are spending 6 hours of your day putting out fires, being in meetings, thinking about the future, and missing the fundamentals of the basics of what is actually happening and what is changing. And with almost 5 generations of people within companies, things are changing at the speed of light. And it's all the nuances that are compounding over time, where somebody can wake up and they can feel completely disconnected with the company. We saw it in Borders books. We saw it with Kodak. We saw it with Blockbuster. It wasn't a bad decision. It was a bad assumption because people were disconnected. In my opinion, one reason, disconnected from the people, the consumer and the people that were in their company, and they weren't listening. Think Community, we must take time to be reflective and to step back and to think about what we need to do. And step 1, it always starts with the people. And the last step, it ends with the people. Nigel, I appreciate your time. Tell people where they can connect with you and learn more about you.
Okay, you can visit. You've already given us a great plug, but I'll give another one for our website. It's tarralugo.com. And you can also find myself, Nigel O'Neill, on LinkedIn. And I'll be happy to connect with anyone. Happy to talk.
That's great. Nigel, I appreciate your time. Stay on. We'll catch up a little bit more. Think Community, if you want to chat about your business, and you want to talk about any business coaching, feel free to reach me at jondwoskin.com. Nigel, this was a great talk. Thank you so much.